Imagine yourself at the foot of a quiet hill in the remote outskirts of an ancient land. The horizon stretches in soft waves of sand and stone, and a stillness drapes the area as if it has been waiting millennia for a traveler to arrive. Somewhere beneath that tranquil surface, sealed away in fragmented manuscripts, earthen jars, or half-collapsed ruins, lie the echoes of voices long thought gone. Some whispers speak of Jesus in ways that ring familiar, while others paint pictures so different they seem like entirely new stories. These are the lost Gospels, sacred texts that almost made it into the canon of Scripture, but for complex reasons ended up forgotten, suppressed, or mislabeled as heretical. We embark on this journey with open minds and a yearning for insight. Let us not race through dusty pages, but rather meander thoughtfully, letting each clue expand our appreciation of the past. We are not here to prove a point or settle a debate, only to wonder at how many roads early Christianity could have taken, and to reflect on the fragile nature of sacred tradition. A glimpse into suppression and silence. One might picture the first century as a tumultuous spiritual landscape. Different Christian communities scattered throughout Judea and the Mediterranean. Each cherished its own unique set of writings about the life and teachings of Jesus. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, a diverse array of Gospels, letters, and theological treatises circulated among believers. Some communities possessed what we might now consider orthodox texts, such as the letters of Paul or the 4 canonical Gospels attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Others, however, prized different accounts, texts that diverged in style, content, or emphasis. These alternative scriptures often bore the names of famous apostles or disciples: Thomas, Peter, Mary Magdalene, Judas Iscariot. They purported to record secret revelations, private dialogues, or hidden teachings that Jesus gave behind closed doors. For those who treasured them, these works filled in gaps, offered deeper spiritual truths, or clarified cryptic sayings that mainstream tradition left unexplained. Yet as Christian authorities moved toward a standardized canon, these texts began to face mounting suspicion. Bishops and key centers of the Roman Empire eventually grew wary of writings that circulated outside their oversight. Gradually, a consensus formed that only certain Gospels and epistles were to be read in church or passed down as authoritative teachings. Texts that did not align with these choices and the beliefs that shaped them were labeled heretical or simply deemed untrustworthy, left to decay in remote deserts, hidden in monastic libraries, or lost in the labyrinth of history. Names that haunt history. Among these lost texts stand out a few that continue to stir curiosity. The Gospel of Thomas is famous for its short, cryptic sayings. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene focuses on Mary's role as a privileged recipient of secret teaching. The Gospel of Peter stuns readers with a dramatic resurrection scene. The Gospel of Judas offers a radical reappraisal of Judas's actions in the final days of Jesus' life. These texts beckon us with alternate visions of Christ's ministry, but they also provoke questions about why they ultimately did not make the cut, lost, or simply overlooked. While the phrase "lost Gospels" conjures the image of hidden scrolls locked away in dusty caves, it might be more accurate to say some were intentionally left behind. Church leaders in the 2nd through 4th centuries engaged in spirited debates about which writings truly represented the authentic teachings handed down from the apostles. In those debates, the lost Gospels did not fare well. They were called unorthodox, branded as the work of fringe sects, or criticized for theological innovations that conflicted with what was becoming mainstream Christian thought. Yet from a different perspective, these lost texts are not wholly lost at all. Portions or fragments of them survived in quotations found in the works of early church fathers who argued against them. Others were uncovered in astonishing archaeological discoveries, such as the Nag Hammadi Library, It is by piecing together these scattered remnants that scholars now attempt to resurrect the voices of these forbidden scriptures. Echoes of ancient deserts, Nag Hammadi and beyond. In December of 1945, near the small town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, a cache of ancient codices changed our understanding of Christian history. Bound in leather and composed in Coptic, these writings included more than 50 texts, many of which were previously unknown or barely known from secondary references. Among them was a complete version of the Gospel of Thomas. This library gave birth to a surge of interest in Gnosticism, a broad label for certain theological movements that emphasized hidden knowledge, gnosis, as the key to salvation. Within these texts, readers found cosmic myths, alternative accounts of creation, and teachings that diverged sharply from conventional dogma. Some placed an extraordinary emphasis on the divine spark within each person, while others reimagined biblical figures with entirely new significance. The Dead Sea Scrolls connection. Though the Dead Sea Scrolls found in the Judean desert near Qumran primarily relate to a Jewish sect often identified with the Essenes, they nonetheless set the stage for a wave of interest in newly unearthed manuscripts. The scrolls predate Christianity, but illuminate the cultural and religious context in which early Christian writings emerged. They underscore just how dynamic and varied Jewish thought was around the time of Jesus, showing us the complexity of beliefs that later shaped nascent Christian communities. This broader environment of rediscovery encouraged a re-evaluation of early Christian literature that had fallen outside the traditional canon. Suddenly, lost Gospels were no longer a footnote in obscure scholarly treatises. They became living voices that could reframe how we see the development of Christian thought. Reading the fragments. Not all rediscovered texts have been found intact. In many instances, scholars must work like detectives, sifting through fragments, comparing multiple versions, and trying to reconcile differences in translation. A single manuscript might be incomplete or damaged beyond easy recognition. Perhaps only a few lines remain that reference a conversation between Jesus and one of his disciples. But even these small shards can open giant windows into forgotten spiritual imagination. Think of a single line that suggests Mary Magdalene understood a teaching the male apostles did not, or a passage that indicates Judas acted with Jesus' private blessing. Such scraps, though fleeting, prompt us to reconsider familiar narratives in the Bible's final form. They remind us that early Christianity was anything but monolithic. Instead, it was a swirling confluence of ideas, traditions, and fervent debates. An ongoing quest. Despite major finds like the Nag Hammadi codices, scholars continue to hunt for more lost texts, potentially buried in desert caves, stashed in remote monastic libraries, or hidden behind walls of ancient buildings. Digital imaging techniques can sometimes reveal hidden layers of text on old parchments that were scraped clean and reused, a practice known as palimpsesting. Even as we speak, there might be a discovery waiting to redefine what we know. Challenging traditional interpretations. Whenever a new manuscript surfaces or a known text is carefully reevaluated, the conversation about Christian origins flares to life. Perhaps the recovered text shifts our understanding of a core doctrine, the divinity of Jesus, his relationship to God the Father, the resurrection. Or it might question the assumption that leadership in early Christian circles was strictly male-dominated. Some lost Gospels highlight female disciples in roles of prominence, creating a stark contrast to the patriarchal structures that later took hold in church hierarchy. To many believers, these new perspectives can be troubling. They appear to threaten long-cherished doctrines. Others see them as liberating, offering fresh insights into spiritual mysteries. Some read them as purely historical artifacts with no binding authority, while others embrace them as legitimate glimpses of the earliest Christian revelations, alternate visions of Jesus. If you open the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will find Jesus portrayed as healer, teacher, Messiah, Son of God, and Redeemer. Yet in some lost Gospels, he appears as the bringer of secret wisdom, as though his core mission was to unlock spiritual knowledge hidden within each person. In still others, he seems more otherworldly, less human, or more cryptic in speech than the Jesus we know from church tradition. To encounter these differing portrayals can be like looking at a precious gem from new angles. Each facet refracts light differently, revealing colors we did not see before. In one text, the emphasis might be on Jesus' hidden dialogues with a favored disciple. In another, the story highlights cosmic battles beyond anything the canonical Gospels describe. With every discovered or re-examined text, the multifaceted nature of early Christian devotion comes into sharper focus. Shifts in mainstream theology. For centuries, mainstream Christian theology has built upon the foundation of the canonical New Testament. Creeds, catechisms, and centuries of sermons have reinforced the narratives found in the accepted books. Yet modern scholarship, influenced by the wave of discoveries, has begun to ask, how did we end up with only these specific texts, and what might we learn from those set aside? While many denominations remain firmly rooted in the traditional canon, some open-minded theologians incorporate the findings from lost Gospels into their exploration of Christian origins. Even if they do not adopt these texts as canonical, they value them for historical insight. This phenomenon encourages believers to see church history in its richly contested context, rather than as a seamless continuity of thought. Public curiosity and controversy. In popular culture, the notion of hidden or forbidden scriptures often sparks fascination. Films, novels, and documentaries speculate about conspiracies, secret societies, or dramatic revelations that might shake Christianity to its core. While such sensationalism can distort the scholarly reality, it does underscore the genuine curiosity people feel toward these lost texts. Conferences, websites, and academic programs devote significant attention to analyzing them. In some circles, these texts are even read as spiritual devotions. All of this activity testifies to their lasting influence. Even if they never enter the official canon, they persist in capturing the human imagination, reminding us that our sacred stories might be bigger, more complex, and more puzzling than we ever realized. The crucial question of authenticity. The moment a new fragment is discovered or a lost gospel is discussed, a flurry of questions follows. Was this text really composed in the first century, or was it fabricated centuries later? Did it truly emerge from the apostle whose name it bears, or was that name attached to lend it an air of authority? These are not mere academic curiosities. They shape whether people view the text as a genuine early Christian witness or a later invention. Scholarly methods and tools. Historians and biblical scholars employ a range of techniques to assess authenticity. Paleography examines handwriting styles to gauge the approximate date of writing. Radiocarbon dating tests the age of papyrus or parchment. Textual criticism compares the language, vocabulary, and grammar to known works of the same era. If a gospel's Greek or Coptic usage matches well with first-century norms, that weighs in its favor, though it remains possible that a skilled forger could mimic archaic styles. Additionally, scholars examine theological and historical anachronisms. For instance, if a text references a doctrine clearly developed in the 4th century, it likely does not date back to the time of Jesus' original disciples. Conversely, if it contains a style of theological argument typical of the 2nd century, it might indeed hail from that era. A patchwork of perspectives. Even when experts agree a text dates to a certain century, debates can flare over the implications. One scholar might see the lost gospel as a vital testament to early Christian diversity. Another might suspect it represents a fringe community with unorthodox ideas. A third might note that even fringe ideas provide valuable insight into how the broader Christian world took shape. The Gospel of Thomas, for instance, has sparked countless discussions. Some see it as reminiscent of authentic early Jesus traditions, perhaps even predating the canonical Gospels in certain respects, while others view it as a later Gnostic text that adapted older sayings to fit new theological frameworks. The tension arises because the dating of each fragment is often uncertain, and the lines between mainstream and fringe remain fluid in early Christianity. Between heresy and orthodoxy, the line between heretical and orthodox was not always as rigid in the earliest centuries as it became later. Church authorities worked gradually to define the boundaries of correct belief, often reacting to movements they perceived as harmful. In that process, some communities were sidelined, and some texts were deemed unacceptable for public reading. Does that automatically render those texts inauthentic or worthless? Not necessarily. Indeed, they might preserve voices that simply lost the political or theological battles of their day. In reading them, we confront the reality that history can be written by the victors, and that other voices, while once drowned out, can still echo powerfully if rediscovered centuries later. Unveiling tomorrow's discoveries. With every generation, new discoveries continue to rewrite our understanding of early Christianity. Archaeological digs might unearth a hitherto unknown gospel. Digitization projects in monasteries and libraries across the globe keep revealing hidden lines in old manuscripts. Advancements in imaging technology and artificial intelligence promise to piece together textual puzzles once deemed unsolvable. Every find has the potential to stir excitement and controversy. A newly uncovered text might upend assumptions about how early Christians viewed Jesus' childhood, the role of Mary Magdalene, or the path to salvation. The process can be disorienting, but it is also liberating, reminding us that the story of Christian origins remains a grand tapestry full of unfinished threads. Revisiting the Canon. While the official biblical canon is firmly established in most churches, modern believers now have unparalleled access to texts once locked away in academic circles. This invites them to wrestle directly with questions of scriptural authority and spiritual authenticity. Does the existence of these lost gospels shake our faith, or does it enrich it by offering broader perspectives? Should the canon remain closed, or might we allow these alternative voices to speak to our modern quests for meaning? Most denominations will likely keep the canon intact. Yet open-minded curiosity can lead to informal readings that incorporate material from these lost texts. In personal study groups, in academic settings, or even in sermons designed to provoke reflection, the once silenced voices of Thomas, Mary, Judas, and others are resurging. Some might see that as a threat, others as a blessing. But in either case, these texts now participate in our living spiritual discourse. A larger view of history. Beyond the domain of religious tradition, these texts matter because they reveal how dynamic and pluralistic the early Christian era truly was. No single theological stance defines the faith's origin story. Different interpretations, rituals, and beliefs coexisted, sometimes harmonizing and sometimes clashing. By recognizing this, we gain a broader perspective on how religions evolve, adapt, and contend with internal diversity over time. As the future unfolds, more lost texts may come to light, and even the ones we already have may be interpreted in fresh ways. Gaps in our knowledge might be filled, or new mysteries might arise, prompting more questions than answers. This ongoing dance between discovery and debate forms the heartbeat of historical and theological inquiry. Carrying the lessons forward. Ultimately, these lost gospels challenge us to approach the history of Christianity, and indeed any religious tradition, with humility and curiosity. They remind us that the boundaries of acceptable belief were drawn over centuries of discussion, sometimes in response to socio-political pressures, sometimes in alignment with deep-seated spiritual insights. By listening carefully to the voices once left behind, we can learn to appreciate the mosaic of ideas and experiences that shaped what would become one of the world's most influential faith traditions. Now, stand once again at the threshold of that lonely desert, recalling the quiet hush of the wind and the vastness of an untraveled expanse. Imagine that under a layer of dust, in a small crevice beneath an aging cliff, a single clay jar might still rest. Within that jar, a papyrus scroll could be waiting, its ink faded, its edges brittle, yet its message potent enough to reshape our stories of Jesus and his earliest followers. The thought is mesmerizing, that at any moment our collective understanding of faith and history could shift. Perhaps the next generation of explorers will discover something so extraordinary it forces us to reevaluate how we see the entire Christian story. Or perhaps the significance lies in how these discoveries continue to remind us that faith, at its best, embraces the possibility of new insight. We have walked through the corridors of time, glimpsed the fervor that once burned in scattered Christian communities, and pondered how certain texts were set aside, while others became pillars of orthodoxy. These lost gospels are more than curiosities. They are windows into the kaleidoscope of human longing, devotion, and imagination. They encourage us to look beyond the boundaries we inherited, daring us to imagine alternative paths that early believers might have traveled. In doing so, we remember that every faith tradition is more than a static list of approved documents. It is a living conversation, a tapestry woven from countless threads, some bright and central, others faint and frayed, but still vital to the larger whole. When we encounter a lost gospel, we do not merely confront a piece of old parchment. We stand face to face with a voice that once carried hope, dreams, questions, and convictions about the divine. As we close this long reflection, let us hold on to the wonder sparked by these hidden stories. May it remind us that history is as vast and mysterious as the deserts that cradle these ancient manuscripts, and that our search for truth may lead us down winding paths, revealing deeper layers of human experience. Whether or not you choose to embrace any portion of these texts as spiritually significant, let them at least kindle a spark of curiosity, a willingness to question, and a readiness to be surprised. For in the end, the journey through the lost Gospels is not about discarding what we already know, nor about blindly accepting every fragment that resurfaces. It is about embracing the fullness of our story, with all its debates and hidden corners. It is about honoring the voices of those early believers who, for reasons we may never fully unravel, dared to write down their encounters with the sacred in ways that diverged from the main road. And it is about recognizing that the path of faith has always been broader than we imagined, stretching across desert sands, winding through hidden libraries, and into the depths of human longing for the divine. May this invitation to wonder stay with you, even as we step away from our expedition into the ancient texts. Perhaps in pondering these lost and rediscovered writings, you too will find yourself drawn to peer into the darkness of a cave, real or metaphorical, listening for faint echoes of old prayers, allowing them to illuminate your own search for meaning. And maybe that, in itself, is the greatest gift of these so-called lost gospels. The gentle reminder that our story, our quest for truth and understanding, continues, forever unfolding, much like a sacred manuscript that is never truly closed.